you. Thank you very much, Steve. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here with an interesting group, a diverse group. I guess the next logical question is, so what data are you using, or should you be using, in all these analytic models we just heard about? And I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. I think that's probably the best thing to do. But what I've asked them to do maybe in the process is take a couple of minutes and not only tell us who you are and what you do, but a short, if we can, a story about a client. I'm trying to think of a TV song that goes with that, a story about it, whatever, that has an ending, of course, about some learning at the end of the trail of getting data, sifting through it, finding the gold within that data. So I'm going to ask you to start, Rick.
Okay, I'm Rick Irwin. I run the data and analytics businesses at Experian Marketing Services. Some of you know who Experian is. Experian Marketing Services is about a $450 million U.S. business and about a $1 billion global marketing services company. And we essentially help brands connect themselves with consumers using a combination of our consumer insights from our own data and analytics capabilities, our targeting capabilities, as well as our cross-channel marketing technologies and program execution expertise. We do that for about 8,000 brands worldwide across 60 countries, and we do it also for about 2,000 partners who use our data and analytics inside their solutions to connect their brand advertisers to their consumers. And so that means we have 7 million use cases for how we do this and a ton of stories. But the one that came to mind when Peter prompted me that I think could be useful for this discussion is we've been working for about 18 months with a major global consumer electronic manufacturer. And this is a manufacturer who distributes their consumer products, which tend to be fairly high-ticket items. They distribute them through all sorts of channels, but they also distribute them via their own e-commerce site. And we've been working with them across a lot of their other media and channels for many years. But they came to us and said, you know, for all the great work that our agency and we do together, our display media no longer generates convertible visitors to our site. And that's costing us about $40 million a year in lost revenue. And these guys compete in a really dog-eat-dog sector of consumer electronics. And so we helped them, we joined with their agency and them to diagnose what was going on there. And essentially they had been relying, their display targeting was reliant on a little bit of their own first-party transactional data and a lot of their own clickstream data, and they had built their programs, their agency had built their programs around leveraging that, optimizing that, but really no third-party data. So we sort of took a page, and this happens frequently for us, where we're able to take a page out of our database marketing heritage, and we created a valuation model for their existing site converters. Just simply a really rigorously developed decile model that valued their site converters from about a year and a half of their transactional data. We married that with all of the data that Experian knows about those same consumers. So that's 2,500 attributes of publicly available.
That's scary, what you know.
2,500 attributes of publicly available and permissioned information. So this isn't really scary stuff, but it allows us to find those site converters from the general display media population. And so we built that predictive audience approach. We deploy that through real-time bidded inventory purchases, and within 2 weeks we had restored their previous level of site conversion for these high-ticket consumer electronics. 1 year later, we had completely replenished that lost revenue stream, and 6 months beyond that, we had significantly surpassed it. And that's not only that's a managed service that we're performing, but that's not only a data exercise, it's a constant analytics and media optimization exercise that, as you all know, brings you very close to your client in determining exactly the right combination of data assets to continue to drive this performance. And the big takeaway, I think, here is, in this one, is that you might be over-reliant on your first-party data strategy. And there's almost no client we're working with, particularly in targeted display, where third-party data and first-party data together don't produce a order of magnitude better result than first-party data alone. Yet we still meet a lot of advertisers who simply haven't yet reached that conclusion for themselves.
Gotcha. Particularly at the top of the funnel,
right?
Where you're trying, what you don't know.
That's right.
Is more than what you know.
That's right.
About those people.
That's right.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Dan?
So I'm Dan Gallagher. I'm the VP of Paid Media over at Booyah Advertising. We're a full-service digital agency in Denver, Colorado. And what we are really tasked to do is, we're centered around media, optimizing media with display, video, mobile, paid search, and also organic. And we also have a big emphasis on performance creative. So we're focusing on the rich media, the video, the banner ads, and any landing environment or any kind of influence we can have on our consumers' websites or social pages. So the story I was thinking about from where we've kind of gone from in this stage, and from Booyah's standpoint, we've naturally kind of evolved into the traditional way. Everybody kind of bought display media and relying a lot on kind of other people's data and fractional targeting and behavioral targeting. We went through all those kind of stuff, and we've gotten to the point now where we're working with our clients to get closer control of their own data and help them take ownership of their own data and segment their own data and understand it to the way they need to, and also understand the data capture that they can actually have on their site. There's a lot more data capture that happens on their site that they don't even take advantage of, that the consumer is telling them actively while they're shopping, and they're not actually taking that information and using it. So we now deploy a ground crew to kind of go through all that for our clients, and then centralize that data for them. So, the story that we've kind of worked with is so one of our big clients, Dish Network. They're going through a renaissance a little bit of their branding, and they're trying to find new audiences to market to. If you guys are familiar with Dish, for years and years and years, it was $19.99 TV. You can get your TV for $19.99, only $19.99, and it became real commoditized. They've now tried to pivot and come with more technology-based product called the Hopper. If you guys know the Boston guys and the Hoppa, you probably know Dish a little bit better now. But now they're trying to further segment. And with their technology, we've looked at their traditional database, and we've done that curation of the data. But now we're looking for opportunities to actually position the TV provider with the entertainment more. As a consumer, most people love their entertainment. They kind of don't love their provider. Nobody loves their provider, right? In the consumer reports, I think the post office and the airlines rank higher than actual TV providers in customer satisfaction. So we're trying to get their actual product positioned closer to the entertainment you love. And some of this centers around stuff that people are very passionate about, so sports or music or even family programming. And so we've actually done a data append, kind of a second-party data match with Dish's own customer base and a very large event-based ticket provider to see, okay, well, what are people actually purchasing on, and how can we append these attributes that we know about your consumers, but then actually what they're actually passionate about and attending and live audiences. So are they going to sporting events? Are they going to family shows? And are they going to these kind of music shows? And it's been very interesting. I mean, the one thing that that's coming to fruition is Dish is actually going to has more of a sports story than they ever had now. DirecTV has killed them for years, just putting tons of money in to a Sunday Ticket. But now with this, we actually can now use this data that we have to understand who their audience is, but also with their new, like one technology feature that Dish has is that you can now actually access live TV anywhere through Sling technology, right? It's all integrated. It costs nothing. And so if you are a Denver Broncos fan in Denver, you don't care about the Sunday ticket. You just want to always have the Broncos at your fingertips. And now there's a story to tell there for Dish where they were getting killed for so long in the NFL conversation. This also applies to MLB and NBA. And now we have this segmented audience where we know who are passionate and how to find more people that look like that in those geo regions and go and tell the specific stories. So we have a whole new story to tell for these guys and that positions their product with this very passionate consumer base that loves their teams. And it's impacted everything, not only display and how we do the creative, the storytelling on the site, but we also impacted our search, and we've expanded our search terms to try to capture this message for people who are searching these kind of things and take this to fruition. So it's whole new levels of storytelling that we can do now for this multifaceted product.
Very cool. I like we've gone from the third-party data that now we're talking about second-party data, a little, getting closer, nice information by understanding the customer, what their affinities are, and we can find the second-party data that really you can understand and trust.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been our approach is go to first party, how can we augment the first party as much as possible? And then the third party stuff we get into, but I think you have to get to know your data provider, right? You have to be very intimate. And I think the partnership that Rick talked about is important. You can't, we're a little weary about willy-nilly just
right.
buying a lot of pieces out there. We want to get to know the data partners and their data and how they curate that data as much as possible.
Very nice. Okay, what I'd like to do now is go over to Keith, if I may, because I see this as concentric circles. Okay, we're going from the third party to the second party, and Keith, from your viewpoint in social and things, I'm going to kind of, before we get to Shannon and Chris, we're really into first party. How about you, Keith? Tell us what you're doing. Okay.
Oh, ouch.
Come on.
He's at age before beauty. What's up with
You were
that?
falling asleep anyway.
So I'm Keith Pape. I'm the head of social media for Eisenberg Group, which is a independent agency out of California and London. We're working with a global publisher right now that's gone through some leadership changes recently. And so one of the thing that's been really interesting as they relaunch a lot of their product sets has been they started, I think with all of their branding initiatives, they start with their qualitative analysis and their research and going out there as they've been kind of trying to determine how to not only rebuild their brand, but how to rebuild each of their product brands. And as they get ready to go to market, one of the things that they've been utilizing us for, which has been really interesting and a different kind of challenge for us, is to really go out and do the quant analysis from a social perspective. To find creative ways to use their new brand messaging, their new product messaging, new keywords, and utilize this in our social conversations to see how the community at large, whether in the owned, earned, or paid channels, kind of across multiple mediums, how they react to these new terms without actually starting to really roll them out officially, but find ways of how do these new brand positionings, how do these words, how do these stances and tones really resonate with both their existing audience, kind of inside the own channels and the Facebooks and Twitters and that kind of thing, but also on the open web. What's the conversation going on? What's the reaction to the use of these new words in small test cases? And really be able to go beyond what a couple years ago would have been the high level, what do I hear from the squeaky wheel, to really, collecting the data, using a lot of different tools and sources to make sure that we're capturing something that's statistically significant, and really do the analysis and be able to make, real-time changes. It's still a bit of a challenge. I think some of the platforms, especially I think Facebook is one that sticks out right now, where a 72-hour to 90-hour delay is pretty common on their platform still, and that can be really frustrating. But really learning how to scrape this data more effectively, how to collect it, how to run it through different models, and really find out what does the community think as a whole, and how is this statistically significant, and how can we make really quick changes in the way that we roll out content that makes small adjustments to then go and compare that and compare it against the competitive set and what the reaction is to their competitors or from their competitors, and test this out before it goes into final, whether it's the website update or the next piece of broadcast or even new mobile apps that they're rolling out. And we're starting to see this really happen quickly with some actionable insights that even the launch methodology of who makes the announcement, of the head of marketing versus the product developer versus the CEO, and we're finding significant changes in the way that we message things out and how they're perceived, and ultimately the success of the product rollouts we've seen over the last 6 months. It's really been exciting to see how the data really informs not just the creative, but really an entire product set.
Mm-hmm. Really fascinating. Again, now we're moving more deeply into the consumer and understanding their affinities and the culture in which they survive and their own little ecosystem.
Yeah, much deeper than kind of that sentiment analysis that people will kind of attribute
really
to
using social listening data in a whole new interesting way.
Absolutely.
To get even closer to the consumer.
And I know my data providers are happy because the size of the accounts you have to collect that much data and all the comps and comparisons has just been amazing. We've definitely broken several services in just trying to collect so much from the fire hose and different things like that.
Interesting. Okay. Now Shannon and Chris actually are friends and also work together on the current business, right? And so that's why I thought it'd be good for you guys to actually talk together as a team and getting closer, like even on the website, first-party information that you're using to make decisions. So I'll let you guys regale us with a story.
Well, I hope we're friends. We just met for the first time last night for about 5 minutes, but
we didn't know where you went.
we are partnered with Bonnier as on the publisher side, and I'll just give a quick a few seconds on what we do. YieldBot is a publisher side analytics technology that looks at and attempts to understand the real-time intent of every visit to every page view to every URL on a publisher site, and we actually distill that data into keyword values so that search marketers can purchase it in exactly the same way that they buy search keywords. So essentially we've created a search operating system utilizing first-party data off of premium publisher content that allows real-time ad decisioning within premium publisher inventory. So we're making real-time session-based ad matching decisions on publishers to try to give search marketers a new platform and new impressions to buy outside of search and to bring search dollars to publishers that they've never been able to access before. Actually, interestingly, one of the things that Keith was talking about was sort of a new lexicon of terms, a new lexicon of words. One of the things that we've discovered in what we do is that the semantics of publisher intent actually vary and is a bit different from the way search marketers might look at keywords in search, but that doesn't mean that they're any less effective or less important. It just means that from the perspective of the marketer and from the perspective of the publisher, they just have to put new resources against the interpretation of those new semantics or those new terms. To the degree that we work with publishers like Bonnier and others, hopefully we're providing them two essential and important resources. Number one is new analytics and new ways of looking at how their audience is behaving, how they get to the site, why they get to the site, why are they coming to this page on the site, and to be able to answer that question and make decisions on that question in real time. And then the second is obviously to bring a new demand source to them that they can access. And from the perspective of the case study that you sort of asked us to talk about in terms of solving a problem, other than bringing a new budget, one of the things that we've been able to realize is that by being able to make these decisions in real time and optimize against the data, almost to the URL level for the publisher, is that we've been able to deliver third-party demand source to publishers that has a significant premium over the third-party demand sources that they're using more traditionally. So that's been a big help, and obviously the fact that the performance for marketers is there and compares to search. So our hope is that the publishers will really embrace this, because it's a first-party and transparent way for them to understand their audiences better and to understand how advertisers that they have had trouble working with traditionally can get access to their site, and give the publishers themselves a better understanding of why those advertisers are buying certain pieces of inventory, as opposed to a third-party source. We talked about, potentially DSPs, and there's certainly value there, and obviously AdSense and others, where the publisher themselves have less transparency or clarity around why did this advertiser buy this ad at this time, because the publishers themselves are not the ones that are looking at the price and the performance in those particular instances, and we want to bring that back to them, and we think they can benefit by orders of magnitude if they engage with that.
Shannon, is he doing a good job?
So far, so good. Hello, I'm Shannon Rudd. For the past 2 years, I was running digital biz dev for the parenting group of titles, and recently have been promoted at Bonnier to GM of digital for all the New York-based titles, primarily the men's group, which includes like Pop Sci, Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, and a host of other magazine brands. We are currently working with YieldBot on first-party data as well as third-party data streams. A lot of my role is around yield optimization and generating new revenue streams from the publisher side.
So he is doing a good job. And how do you feel about Field and Stream?
Learning a lot about fishing.
Where are you going this afternoon? No. It's the only magazine I remember going to an old barber shop, and you'd read Field and Stream. I don't know. With barber shops, I'm sure circulation's a little down. That was great. I mean, I just think it was interesting how we go from, if you will, third party, top of the funnel, to second party, to closer in, if it was social, at least in terms of not officially second party, but the affinity and deeper dive. And then you're into first party data as the consumer journey, if you think about it, proceeds. I'm looking like the journey is here. And I'm just wondering, from each of you in your individual spots that you fill in the journey, or for the client, that is, do you feel sometimes you don't get to do this enough, that is, talk to everybody else that's servicing the client and helping them touch the consumer along this journey?
Well, I'll just jump in and say I think integration continues to be one of the single biggest missing links in our industry. It's not because we don't all communicate well with each other and collaborate well. I mentioned that we work with a couple thousand partners worldwide, and a lot of those partners are companies represented in this room. And so I think, I wish we had
is it kind of unique that you're all sitting in the same room?
No. I don't think it's unique at all. These panelists I haven't met before.
Yeah, I think it's really common for, we all sit in the same room, but I think, a lot of times we're at different agencies, we're being incentivized by the client, by different financial systems to do work. It's not always easy, even with the best intentions to make all those pieces come together. Now, there are those really well-organized clients that get the value of it, and they make sure to set things up, and I think you're starting to see that more and more, where we have quarterly brainstorming meetings with clients where all the agencies are brought in, and they make sure we're seeing models change to make sure that there's a really good reason for everybody's businesses to come together for the client and to really collaborate and share pieces across without feeling like you're cannibalizing your business.
Gotcha. How about you guys? How about you, Dan?
I mean, I think we just all come with our own perspective here, And I think everybody trusts their own data, right? So I know I trust my data, and I know Rick trusts his data, and I know Chris trusts his data. But like at some point, like the integration piece is key, right? Like how do we start trusting each other's data? I think Todd from the last panel said at Axiom, it's like, hey, it looked great. Everybody's buying our data, and it was awesome, but the results were a disaster, right? And so, how do you get to this point of like knowing like there's so much out there to go grab, and how do you test stand, and how do you measure effectively? How do we start building trust between our data sets, or what you think you're standing on solid ground is it's the same solid ground with me, right? And so, from that perspective, I think that's where everybody's still trying to find their way through the forest a little bit, is trying to find who are the right data partners, what's the right data sets, and how do I actually pivot on them and make more of it?
Right.
I think that one of the things that forces these types of organizations to work together, we have a specific specialty, and there are other organizations that are looking at data in a different kind of a way. And one of the main things that we hear from marketers, across the spectrum is scale, right? So scale will force different types of platforms to have to work together in order to be able to deliver. This was sort of the question that I had asked to Adriana earlier, which was about, you have to force these things together. Otherwise, from the marketer's perspective, they have to work with too many different fragments. Right. In terms of the organization, or agencies have to work with too many different fragments of the ecosystem. So scale will force some level of convergence around these issues, so that marketers can get not only the performance and the data that they need, but also they can get it at scale so that it's impactful for them.
Gotcha.
And I think that that's probably one of the things that will force this marketplace to continue to come together, whether it's through M&A or just sort of JVs or just big agencies, probably like Todd, pulling all of these different pieces into one sort of more unified construct, I guess, for those big clients.
Let me just get this come back to the journey. So it's clear, we believe, you all play nicely together, and your data could work nicely together, integrated, as it were. How often do you have that big picture perspective, though, from the client or otherwise, on the whole journey? So when you're picking up the ball, or you're picking up the ball, certainly at the end, do you get the big view? Is somebody starting from that and saying this is where you're fitting in, or do you feel like you could have a better perspective on what is the big picture, the touch points that on the customer journey that you're all trying to execute? Do you feel you understand the journey?
I think for us, from the publisher side, it's really understanding where your users coming in from, and that's been great working with YieldBot. It's all intent-based targeting, in finding the needs of a first trimester mom is very different than a third trimester versus woman or family with a newborn versus a toddler, and solving those needs, and then making sure that you're delivering the right message and the right advertising message, right in point time to that user.
Gotcha. So it's important you really understand the customer and their journey to do all this.
Yes.
How about the rest of you? Do you feel you get a viewpoint on that? Or that sometimes you're not privy to the big picture?
From our perspective, we're a digital agency, so typically we are the digital agency of record, right? So from that perspective, I think we're always trying to bring forth new insights that we can actually pick out from a digital perspective, because it can be much more granular, much more nuanced, into a larger kind of who is your audience kind of conversation. And feels like if we swim upstream a little bit on that one.
You do.
So we're trying to, as we try to bring these forward, we're just trying to make sure that it makes sense in this kind of what are they doing in TV, and what are they doing in print, and how are they targeting that, and how are they doing direct mail, and how can we share those insights, and starting to bridge those gaps between some of those channels from a purely digital perspective takes a lot of cross education with especially depending on the organization, if it's very segmented or siloed along those lines, as far as these are my TV people and my TV agency, and this is my print guy, and my we now have to force each other into a room to understand this is how we see the data, how do we cross test some of this stuff, right? A lot of that for Dish, we've done a lot of that with their direct mail stuff, right? We're trying to see what they're modeling, they're doing
Gotcha.
on that side. How do we actually complement that or not complement that with digital?
Gotcha.
I would say it's about, from the provider side, and it would be really interesting to hear Shannon comment on this, from the provider side, it's about being transparent and being interoperable, because among our 8,000 advertiser clients worldwide, it's a spectrum. There are a number of them, including some very, very large companies that don't have a digital agency of record, or that work on a fractured basis with several of them. And we have other big clients, medium clients, and small clients who silo themselves to the point where the person who's responsible for achieving an uptick in bottom funnel display conversions just wants to make that happen. They just want to make that happen. And at some level, we can talk to that person, we can talk about a bigger journey, but we also have to make that person successful.
Right.
And so it's about being interoperable, trying to keep a big picture view of things, but also trying to move the ball forward for that company according to the way it's chosen to organize itself and
make decisions.
And attack its marketing goals.
How they make their decisions.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's another kind of data we haven't talked about, and it's one closest to my heart, which is just survey data, right? Going out and doing surveys, quantitative or qualitative, about the consumer, and really deeply understanding them. And I was talking to some of our more advanced analytics guys the other day, and they're doing all these econometric models and Bayesian things and nonlinear regressions and things like whatever. And I said, does it make sense? And they go, if I have a survey to help me to understand this, it's a whole lot better, right? So just coming back to the data that is used to, we're all sifting through, sometimes does it help you guys to say, has anybody done a survey here where I can really understand more than just the behaviors? I can really understand the reasons why and who these people are?
We recently did an online survey with alongside one of the campaigns that we were running with a major women's brand. Your sort of basic brand lift survey that came across for users that had seen the ads that we ran, vis-a-vis brand recognition and from the perspective of the brands, it sounds like it still matters to them. The basic survey information still matters to them because they were pleased, with the results that we saw, and that was just sort of a basic brand lift concept. So even though we're a very sort of tip of the spear technology, big data analytics business, at the end of the day, the execution around the ad serving was still, a survey to people who had seen the ad. Do you recognize the brand? Do you like it or not? Mm-hmm. And so, those types of executions still go along with the big data analytics stuff that we're doing and talking about.
Right. Well, we work with Experian sometimes, and you've got all this great demographic and behavioral data.
But we also own the Simmons National Consumer Study that's used survey sampled research that dimensions every bit of TV, media that's available to buy, and it dimensions it by everything that the household does. So my answer to you is, love survey data. All data, I love all data. You have to find how it fits into solving a marketing problem, right. And survey data is a critical piece of that. I'll give you one example that people might not think about. So there's so much attention now on our industry in Washington, much more than I ever wanted, I guess. But one of the things that people inaccurately seize on is this notion that somehow there's private health information about consumers available out there. Well, there is, and it's provided by the consumers with their permission to use it for marketing purposes. And if you're trying to do, we partner with a very large HIPAA-compliant anonymous pharmacy data company. What they do is they take anonymized pharmaceutical data from the pharmacy prescriptions and use it to make more relevant advertising based on compliance and persistency. Well, you need self-reported ailment data to make really good decisions in some of those cases, mm-hmm. right? So that's an example of where survey data, right. if you will, is critically important.
It's critical. One of the questions we were our panel was supposed to address too is how, given all the data, so we've talked about quality of data, I think, a little bit anyway. Then you have all the data. Well, how do you know the right data to really look at? You know, and of all the data you've been, and through tests and retests, maybe you find out what really is predictive of things. I just wondered what tools, if any, you're using to help determine, of all the data you could look at, which ones are really the top 10 for any given client.
I don't know if there's a top 10 for the data you should look at. I mean, I think, to me, this is why analysis is hard, and this is why it takes humans. So this is where the machines get removed. This is where having smart people who understand their brand, or agencies who are invested in that market segment, really come together. Is because just like with SEM, it's something that's learned over time. It's an expertise that's built in not only narrowing down keywords and understanding sentiment or tone or meaning. But this is where you mix all this in, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with integration before. Is that sometimes the levels of assuredness that you have with the data that you're collecting, or how much you're collecting, depend on what's the needs of the program.
Right.
It's almost like rich media on the display side. Is that sometimes all you get is the Google CPC ad, because that's the level of financial investment that makes sense. So you're going to take that data set. Where sometimes you're paying for, that and third party, and you put them together and you run it against it with, simple tools. But sometimes you do third party verification because you're trying to continue to increase that level. But there's costs that go along with that. And there's got to be a cost benefit analysis for that data. So I think that the larger data set, and then the more specific that you winnow it down to, really depends on the importance. I think I love the comment about the $2 million space pen versus the $2 pencil. It was probably a 30-cent pencil. It's just that level of data sifting just probably isn't required for most systems. It's just not worth the cost.
Gotcha. Also mentioned earlier, comes to mind, and I think you touched on it, about just an ongoing relationship with a client where they're continually asking different questions, right? I mean, it seems to be the questions du jour. I mean, some months, this is the issue, let's solve for that. Another month, they have a different issue. So sometimes when we say what data works or matters, it kind of depends on what's the question they're trying to answer, right?
Without leading it and sending your results astray.
Right. But do you find then dialogue with the client has to be ongoing when you're talking about data, or just when you get it settled, there's a different questions, in which case you're trying to get different data to answer a different question?
I think we find that we have to, ongoing dialogue and education is key with our end clients, and it's also, we've got to push ourselves to challenge the client to a degree to, if we're going to do the work to segment and understand their audiences to the degree we want to, then we got to challenge them on the product they're putting forth. And that's sometimes an awkward conversation. It's from an agency perspective, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to make sure that they're happy. And some clients like to be challenged, some don't. So from our perspective, it's knowing when to challenge and doing it with enough backup to do so, and then trying to take that risk in. We come with a test-in methodology all the time, though, so we're not trying to risk too much. We're trying to make sure we're measuring lift in any way we can. So having our clients kind of get that spirit of, okay, we're going to test in and take a flyer on some small pieces of data. They get more adventurous that way from our perspective.
Gotcha.
That's kind of some of the value you bring, though, is that you're bringing that scalability and the size. You're bringing that kind of value that you have. You have multiple clients, and you're seeing multiple things every day. You're a bigger view, and hopefully they respect the fact that you're trying to bring additional value than just doing what they ask.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'd be interested to know how the folks at Bonnier, how Shannon, how you guys look at data, with what level of intensity you guys are looking at this stuff at this stage of the game as you sort of evolve from a traditional medium to a digital one.
Yeah, I will say from the publisher side, you're swamped with data. You're looking at your Omniture numbers, your comp score, your Nielsen. your vendor data, your first-party data, your third-party data, your CTRs, your DFP data. I mean, it doesn't end. So what it really gets down to is staffing your organization correctly and, getting in those right analytical people to be able to interpret it, and working with the vendors who can help you solve, not only your publisher needs sides, but also your clients' needs. We work with quite a vast array of clients, from the large, CPPGs down to very endemic mom and pop shops, who are just learning. And then, as it was mentioned earlier, really challenging clients to make sure that they know what their campaign goal is. Is this a branding campaign, or is this a direct response campaign where you want the user to take an action and download a coupon, or, fill out, capture emails. And then, making sure that you're utilizing that data and interpreting it to find the highly sold areas of your site, to find those valuable, maybe niche areas of your site that are under-monetized. That may work great for one client, but not another. And then, having a real robust optimization process, real time, with your ad ops teams, to make sure that you are, adjusting on the fly to meet those clients' needs, to make sure you're delivering the metrics that, they're looking for their campaign.
So how could people like these help you even more? I mean, when you say, because you were telling me you now have, 12 titles you're going to be managing?
Yeah, it keeps growing.
and so your life is not getting any easier. The data's getting more complicated, and 12 times as much. So what could people like this do to help you?
Well, I'll say with our vendors, Yieldbot's been great. They are very, active in terms of not just after the deal's signed, but becoming a partner with us to help us find those insights, help interpret the data, maybe find, learnings that, we just haven't had the, time, to dig through,
Mm-hmm.
And utilizing the data in different ways, from backfill opportunities to creating new premium ad sales products.
Great. And you guys, as you looked at your clients, what do you think they could be helping you to do your job better?
I'll take a crack at that from two angles. One is, because the digital media ecosystem is still young and growing rapidly, we have lots of opportunities to shape it and change its trajectory for the better that don't exist in more mature media. Try to get a TV buyer to change the way they're measuring results, no matter what, and it's very, very difficult because that medium is so mature. So one of the things I think we should be doing is trying to help clients ask the questions that their providers hope that they wouldn't ask. And the reason for that is...
Could you say that again?
So it's everybody who's a provider in the marketing services space, if they're really being honest, can reflect on a time when they went into a client meeting and thought to themselves, I hope they don't ask this. And it's those questions that advertisers want and need answers to. In a young industry, no provider should be ashamed of not having all the answers. Nobody in this room has all the answers. And so I think that it's incumbent upon providers to help clients ask those questions that are sort of behind the scenes questions. And then within the provider...
And not be afraid to say, I don't know.
And not be afraid to say, I don't know. Or not be afraid to say, right now, if you try to build a predictive audience from the available owned and operated third-party cookie pools, you will get a different result than if you build that off of a national compiled database. How could that possibly be? It's the same American consumers. So the only way that can be is if there's something wrong with that the current population of third-party cookies somehow doesn't capture the whole American audience, and it doesn't. But it's okay. We don't need. It's an emerging industry, and it will get better and better and better. So my point here is just providers need to help clients by being very transparent and help teach them to ask the tough questions, even when providers
and learn together.
And learn together, and then within provider companies like Experian, we're investing a tremendous amount of time and effort to make sure that we're maximizing the crossover knowledge between people that may have 20 years of database marketing experience, data-driven marketing experience in more mature channels, with people who might be 25 years old and brilliant about maximizing results from targeted display. That's really, really, really hard. So what that results in is building a model, like in the story I told earlier. That's not just plucking those attributes off of Experian's consumer view database. It's not doing that. It's instead recombining 4 attributes into a new recombinant attribute that looks like income, let's say. And that recombinant attribute works because somebody who'd been doing predictive modeling, audience targeting in database marketing for the last 10 years sat down with somebody from the display ecosystem that works for us and said, wait a second, there's a better way to create this model.
You mean there's a job for old guys like us?
There's a job for old guys.
That's really encouraging.
You've got more runway than I do, probably. And so I think those are the two sides of that.
Very interesting. How about you guys? It's kind of saying there's a cultural issue with the people who are the specialists, the real specialists in many of this, could learn from some of the DMA, if you will, direct marketing kind of knowledge that's been around for many, many years.
I think absolutely. I mean, going back to the part of the original question was what do we need, and part of what we need is that what's the business objective, and some of that comes from that real traditional business savvy experience of understanding what is my goal, what do I want to attain. And by understanding that, by understanding really what, like you said, what's at the bottom of the funnel, is it, what is we really want to do at the end of the day. And from there, we can figure out what data we need, what analysis needs to be provided to it, what the psychographic of the audience are, what the lookalikes are. We'll figure all that out. But if we don't have the KPIs and the business goals in mind, we might be going in the wrong direction. And when you start off 2 inches wrong today, by the time you're 300 days down, you're about 2 miles off.
Whoa. My boss once said, if you're on the wrong train, every stop is the wrong stop.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can relate to that. Although I like your 2 degrees off.
So
Steve, I'm getting a high sign. What do you say?
Well, let's see if we have any questions from the audience.
Okay.
No.
So
We can. Well, we're going to take this
Give 'em a
topic.
break.
Actually, we're going to take this topic up on one of the roundtables.
Okay.
But, so you'll have a chance to go into greater depth there. And in fact, Peter's going to be running that roundtable. But thank you.
very good. Thank you, guys. Very good.